On this particular bicycle wheel, the perfectly fine Shimano bearing was very nearly completely destroyed by the incompetent mechanic or assembly line worker who put it together, presumably at Alex Rims, not sure. In this video I'll show you what went wrong, what can be done about it, what tools and supplies are involved in getting it right. So, the wheel is branded as Alex Rims, model number is MD21. The rim is Alex Rims, the spokes maybe, but the hub and the rotor are Shimano components. It's branded like so, and Shimano printed on the hub. A perfectly functional hub it used to be. This is a cup and cone type bearing that goes into this hub. On one side of the hub, all the components are removed here. You can see the cup surface is the shiny metallic surface on which the bearing balls run. The bearing balls have been removed. Over there, we'll take a look at them. On the other side, same situation. A shiny cup surface is where the bearing balls run. Whatever the shiniest polished surface there is, that's what's in contact with the bearing balls. How this goes together is fairly straightforward. The bearing balls, once they go in, they are on assembly, they are held in place by a little bit of assembly grease, which I have some over here. This is grade 2, NLGI number 2, good enough for typical, the viscosity of it is typical for bearings. This is a seal that is rubberized, but it's metal, but don't bend it, and especially be careful with the rubber lips here. They live there and they cover up the greasy bearing balls. The quick release axle, the axle will eventually mount with the skewer, and this is how the axle assembly looks like. Bearing balls run on the shiny surface here as well, and this shiny surface here as well, and it opens up like so. This needed a 17mm bicycle wrench like so. This lock ring or lock nut here to remove. On assembly, make sure that the serrated surface is facing outside the frame, so the clamping force of the quick release axle is clamping it to the frame, to the fork end. There is a round plain washer that is reversible, and this is the other side of the cup. How the axle looks like. It is a hollow axle like so. Now, so the bearing balls are in contact with this cup surface here where it's shiny or shiniest. This is the line of run. This surface here is covering the seal like so, the bearing balls inside, and the axle end is sticking out with the washer and the lock nut on it. So that's how these go together. I'm gonna assemble it to some degree so you can see how these surfaces interact with each other. I use a pair of tweezers or so these tools for grabbing the bearing balls, and here is where the problems are visible with the bearing balls. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that the cone surface needs a 13mm wrench. You can see the flat sides on the cone there, so the 13mm wrench is removing that initially. All this was, instead of spinning smoothly, it was grinding with some resistance, and that became immediately obvious. There's a problem. You see all of these metal flakes sparkling in the light here? It's bad. The bearing shouldn't be losing metal at this rate It's really, really bad. Look at that, where that's where my fingertip was, and I was wiping the inside of the cone surface out. And this is how much metal got removed with each wipe, so it's really, really bad. The metal came from partially the surface of the cup, so these cups are garbage, including the surface of the cup on the inside of the hub. Those cups are garbage, the entire hub is garbage, but especially the components that wore most are the bearing balls. 11 on one side, 11 on the other, and you can see some of them are shiny and some of them are dull. They all need cleaning. Ultimately, I need a set of 22 perfectly functional new bearing balls, but in areas or in markets where that's not an option, you might need to assemble it with the old bearing balls. Just clean and assemble it correctly. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that some of these bearing balls are textured, and that's bad. The bearing balls should be completely smooth. You can maybe see that this is textured or this is textured. There's a magnet underneath, that's what's making them stay in place so they don't roll around randomly. That also makes them stick to the tweezers, but this is how they look like. Yeah, this one is really bad as well. So the size of these bearing balls is, just measured it with a digital calipers, 3/16 of an inch. Don't argue with fractions, it is what it is. I didn't make them, just telling you what it is. So not metric, 3/16 of an inch. And on assembly, this is how these would go together. Spread a little bit of grease here inside the cup, take the tweezers and one bearing ball at a time, place them in the grease. They will just stay in the grease. Push the axle through and tighten. This is where the mechanic went wrong. Tightening is the critical bit, and this cup to cup distance here was over tightened. That extra pressure was grinding off the living soul off of those bearing balls. That extra friction is what wore them out. This is why I need to replace at least the bearing balls, and this is what's causing me a few hours of work here.